Good evening. Welcome to the seventh workshop in our series of Resiliency Dialogues, um, sponsored by the Project Protech. And tonight we are very excited to again have a very distinguished panel of speakers. Shao from CTNC Toronto, Olivia Chow, well-known community leader and politician and professor at Ryerson, and Alfred Lam, manager of the Welcome Center of CICS, one of the biggest Chinese Canadian service agencies in the GTA area. So today we're going to tackle the issues around racism and discrimination related to public services. And before we begin, again, we wanted to remind people that this session will be recorded. So if you do not want your image to be recorded, you have the options of turn your camera off. But if you wanted to have the full participation, you're also welcome to keep your camera on. Um, Everyone would be muted. If you wanted to speak and make a comment, please raise your hand in the chat and or put in a comment through the chat, and we hope to have more interaction with you throughout the session. And also our session would be taped and uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if you miss, or if your friends who wanted to come but missed the session, please remind them to check out our YouTube channel. Now we're also broadcasting live on Facebook. So we would have other people who can join us through that discussion. So thank you, and let's get on with our workshop today. So before we start, next slide. We would like to just conduct a quick poll to see who we are having in our audience and participants. So there is a couple of questions. There's 3 questions. If you can scroll down and send your response, that would be much appreciated. Oh, by the way, I'm Alan Lee. I'm one of the co-principal investigators of Project Protech, which was the community-based research study funded by CIHR in response to addressing social issues of the impact of the pandemic on the Chinese Canadian and racialized communities. So I think everyone has voted. Thank you very much. So before we start our session, we would like to pay our respect to our land and our Aboriginal communities. So Rain, would you do the honor?
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name is Rain. I'm one of the staff here at Protect as well. So to begin with our land acknowledgement, with gratitude and respect, our team here at Protect honors and acknowledges that we are gathered on the sacred land covered by Treaty 13 signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaty signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Toronto is located on the Dish with One Spoon territory, a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bounds them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and all other newcomers were also invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect to share and care for the resources of this land. We are aware of the ongoing impact of colonialism, racism, and other forms of discrimination and social injustices that disproportionately impacts Indigenous people and racialized communities here on Turtle Island, also known as North America. We stand in solidarity to continue our fight against anti-Indigenous, anti-Black, anti-Asian, Islamophobia, and any other forms of racism and social oppressions locally and globally.
Thank you, Rain. And so this is the Chinese version of the land acknowledgement. Next slide. So again, you can see our panel of speakers tonight. But before we do that, we wanted to also share with you some guidelines for our workshops so that we can all have a safe, supportive, and helpful environment to enable a very fruitful discussion and exploration on our anti-discrimination and anti-racism strategies. So in our Zoom sessions, we would hope that and want to make sure that there is no online harassment of any kind, that we want to maintain a non-judgmental and constructive spaces that uphold principles of equity and social justice. So to enter this meeting, You must agree to the following. Keep your mics muted unless you wish to speak, and ensure minimal background noises so that we don't disrupt each other, and dress appropriately. Ensure anything shown on the camera is appropriate and not offensive to people. And when you're turning on your cameras to use the video option, please only show the upper portion of your body. And do not take screenshots or conversations here, and be courteous and respectful of other participants. If we found that anyone is consciously disrespectful of others or does not respect the accountability, they will be removed. And so if you can, please type, yes, I agree, in the chat box, it would be much appreciated. So this is the Chinese version of the guidelines. Thank you. So again, our panel of speakers tonight bring with themselves, a very wide breadth of experience and years of working in the community. So I would like to actually invite them to tell you a little bit about themselves before we go into some of the scenarios we want to discuss. Maybe in order of their speaking, we would invite Kay first.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Kate Shao. I'm a board member of the Chinese Canadian National Council Toronto chapter. And I also work as a lawyer for the City of Toronto. And I'm incredibly honored to be here today as a panelist amongst some very inspired co-panelists.
Thanks, Kate. Alfred?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alfred Lam. I am a board member of the OCASI Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants, OCASI. I also work for an agency called Center for Immigrant and Community Services. And the main area of my work is the Welcome Center system, which we manage one of those centers in Markham.
And Olivia.
Hi, Olivia Chow. I teach most of the time, and I run an institute called Institute for Change Leaders. And it's been 4 or 5 years. We've trained over 6,000 to 7,000 people on political and community organizing. I also teach at Ryerson University, and I always call myself a recovering politician because I spent 30 years being elected, so politically very engaged during those periods.
That's
it's
great.
To join all my old friends and some new friends.
Yeah.
I know.
So we're all connected by the community and the various work we've been working through the years. So I'm really excited to have all of you in this session. So we have a couple of cases that we wanted to explore with people, and they kind of deal with different levels of public services with different levels of government. So maybe we could start with the first scenario, that's a case scenario. So if we can show that on our slide, and we can read that out as well as.
Okay.
So I
Sure.
think, Kay, maybe you can read it because Rain is monitoring the waiting.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
So here's our first case scenario. Susan is at Trinity Bellwoods Park having a picnic with her friend. A City of Toronto bylaw enforcement officer tickets her and her friend for breaching the physical distancing bylaw and mumbles, "That's what you get for bringing the virus here." Susan notices that nearby groups were not ticketed. She and her friend are of East Asian descent and are the only racialized people in the vicinity. So this scenario is obviously fictionalized, but based off a couple of cases that I dealt with while at the City of Toronto's Human Rights Office this past summer. As I'm sure many of you remember, the city implemented a number of emergency orders and bylaws to limit the spread of COVID-19 in the spring, one of which was the physical distancing bylaw, which was enacted in April. And it mandates that people who are not from the same household have to maintain a physical distance of 2 meters or 6 feet apart in parks, public squares, or beaches. So when I was in the Human Rights Office, we saw a bunch of complaints from members of the public who felt that they were being racially targeted or discriminated against by the city's bylaw enforcement staff while in parks. So I thought this would be a useful scenario for us to work through today, because the pandemic is unfortunately still very much not over, and this bylaw is still being enforced.
So maybe before we discuss the responses and strategies, we could do our poll and see how our audience might react to this scenario.
Of course, yeah. Feel free to launch poll.
So Rain.
Yep, 1 second.
So there is a couple of questions that we're gonna try to get your response first. So since the start of COVID-19 pandemic in the area of public and government services, have you experienced any racism or discrimination directly, personally? Have you witnessed a racist incident related to public or governmental services, or heard about racist incident amongst your family, friends, or colleagues?
And I will post up the poll for the scenario as well too after we finish this one.
Okay.
So for the one for the scenario is this one.
So if you were Susan, who's the person in the scenario, what would you do? So you can choose more than one option, right? So you can choose all that applies.
This one I think is the single one, and then the next one is the. Sorry, one of the questions is the multiple one.
I think the third one is the multiple one.
And then if you have other suggestions, please feel free to put it in the chat. Okay, so now we're getting responses.
So I see responses for B and C. Document what happened and report it later. And C, confront the officer and ask why other groups were not ticketed. Do we have all of our polls in?
Yeah, so if you scroll down, you can have question 2 and 3, and please try to respond to all of them if you can.
Okay. Oh, and for number 2 is a bystander. I see we have quite a few different responses. A lot of videotaping would happen. One person would consult Susan after to see if she needs support. Oh, and I'm really liking the polls for question 3. 60% of you would raise awareness after the fact as your way to practice resilience, like writing letters to your elected officials and reaching out to the media.
Yeah.
Okay. If everyone's answered, can I end the poll?
Okay.
Oh, it says only 71% have voted.
So maybe another 10 seconds.
Okay.
There's no right or wrong standard answer. We just want to see, you know, how you would respond. So
yes, there's definitely. Yeah, definitely no right or wrong answer. So feel free to enter in whatever you think you would do.
Okay. So maybe we could.
And great. Yeah, so as Alan mentioned, like there really is no right or wrong answer for any of these questions. And it's important that no matter what you do, like whether you're Susan in the situation or if you're a bystander, that you do what's right and safe for you in the moment. And if your intersectionalities or your identities are such that would put you at risk for greater emotional or physical danger, then sometimes it is best to take a non-confrontational approach, like documenting what you saw and reporting it later.
So would the other panelists like to comment on the scenario? You have to unmute yourself.
And I can share a little bit more if you'd like. I mean, if I were in the scenario, I would document as much as I could in real time or right after the fact, just to ensure accuracy, and then I'd report it or file a complaint. And if I were documenting this, I would try my best to film or have the bystander film, like ask a bystander nearby in this situation for help. In my own experience, having investigated similar racial profiling complaints, I've seen how critical video footage can be in substantiating allegations of racial profiling, because it can be quite difficult to prove, because the city actually doesn't keep race-based stats from by law enforcement officers. So sometimes video evidence really is the best evidence. And for those wondering, for the most part, it actually is legal to film in public places. So it's okay to film the by law enforcement officer if you are in this situation. And when you are filming, I can just give a couple of tips for filming. You're going to want to capture as much identifying information as you can. So that could be, flipping your phone horizontal so you capture like the widest scope. You're going to want to capture like badge numbers or names or license plates, like any kind of identifying information. You're going to want to film in continuous shots instead of stopping and starting, because that would really help the investigator piece together what's actually happening and when it happened. And if you're filming at a distance, I would recommend trying to narrate to the best you can in a very objective way, kind of like a sports commentator, because sometimes the audio doesn't really translate in a video if you're filming from far away. And of course, if you're filming, you're going to want to get Susan's consent, so the person being discriminated against, before you post it. And ideally, if you can, give the footage to Susan in the situation so that they can control the process. And of course, if you're comfortable, you can offer your contact information to be a witness if they do choose to file a legal proceeding. Having witnesses is a really important part of the proceeding.
I would add in and actually decide whether I did breach the physical distancing or not. If I did not, I will be very aggressively say so. If I was, then I'll be a bit sheepish about it. But if I was actually I was with my friend who is part of my bubble and living with my friend. How dare you, right? So you're just picking on me. That's obviously not right. I would actually step it up. I will, with my mask on, ask other people to say, look, I'm physically away at least how many meters away from a whole pile of people. And sometimes cameras, the depth of field looks different. So be careful which angle, you may want other people. And I would actually ask people, now I'm slightly more aggressive than some people. I would actually be loudly saying, hey, those of you over there, you see, am I really that close to you? No, not, I'm not, right? Okay. So may I trouble you to write down your name and your email, pass it on to me, because this guy is picking on me and this is what he just said. I will actually raise a bit of a scene A bylaw officer is not like a cop. I will not necessarily do that as a police officer because I could be charged with obstructing justice. Oh, I don't want to do that. Okay, bylaw officer, all he can do, he cannot do any criminal charges because a bylaw officer is hired by the city of Toronto to uphold bylaws. Okay, so it's a civic case. So I could be a bit bolder, and I'll call him out on it and say, what do you mean? I would actually say it very nicely, but I will actually be louder so that other people can have a learning experience to say, do you even know where I'm from? Right? I would actually go and say, where do you think I'm from? And see if this guy is racist to the bone, probably, or he is whatever it might be, right? But for sure, I'm going to ask him about his name, his position, how long he's been at his job, take a photo of him, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then after that, after I calm down a bit, after he leaves, sorry, he asked me to comment. What can I say? That I would actually, yes, file a formal complaint to his boss. By the way, you can Google City of Toronto staff directory. Okay? You could actually find out, yes, you can. You can find out who is the boss, who is the City of Toronto bylaw enforcement officer manager, who is his boss, and who is the manager of the manager and the manager, and write directly to the manager, copy to him, whatever. And here's the important part. You should send a copy of it to your local city councilor, wherever you live, and say, could you make sure that this is taken care of, that this will never happen again? I want to know what is the consequence of this young man, maybe, behavior. Okay, I want a public apology, and I would escalate it. So that's what I would do, but it's but you need to get to the bottom of it. It's a learning experience for this fellow and for all the people around us, right?
Those are great tips,
Oh.
Olivia. I've seen exactly all those things actually being done at the Human Rights Office. And so Olivia's right. I mean, the staff directory is all public on the city's website. But if you do want to file a formal complaint, you can contact the city's Human Rights Office. A lot of people don't actually know that the city has a Human Rights Office that's open to members of the public when dealing with city staff or dealing with city facilities. So you can file an online complaint there and that will commence an internal investigation. And I have seen situations where people who have fully called out and confronted the officer and said to bystanders, like, hey, do you see what's going on? And have actually gathered quite a crowd. And I've seen situations where bystanders have filmed what's going on and then actually connected with the complainant later on, provided their information so that the complainant could call on them as a witness in our investigation, and that witness and that footage that they gathered was just so critical in us actually being able to substantiate what happened.
So Kate, can I ask a question as far as process goes? Like in this particular scenario, right, the most serious act was that very racist comment that was spoken by the officer. Now, because it was just a split-second comment, most likely you wouldn't have that on video at that point, right? So in this situation, how easy it is to build merit for a complaint when you most likely will not have a recording of the actual words that were spoken?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when you are investigating a complaint, the standard is balanced probability. So is it more likely than not that this comment was said? And so if you have bystanders that can testify to what you said, or even your friend beside you, that really helps in investigations. I've seen situations where a bylaw enforcement officer actually made quite a blatantly racist comment, but we missed, but the footage actually missed it. They started filming right after he said it. But in the footage, the person who was filming actually heard them talk about it after, they heard a bystander say, yeah, I did hear him say like XYZ comment. So that really helped in that investigation. And like, even if you don't have a camera nearby or nothing's caught on film, even if you have a piece of paper, you can just quickly jot down what happened and what time, or even text messages. Those can all be used in investigations as well.
Alfred, do you have any further thoughts, suggestions?
Yeah, no, because it's just that because I know bylaw enforcement, especially in our current situation, right, is starting to generate some controversy. Like some people are complaining of, being targeted and whatnot. So, and I think for most of the population, they don't really know what are the recourses that are available when they are served with an infraction notice, right? Like, is there a court they can make an appearance at, or so I think just that information is very valuable.
Go ahead, Olivia.
I want to ask the question. So to make things a little more complicated, because I think Olivia mentioned earlier, if it's a policeman, then your response might be different, right? So I think we wanted to explore a little bit more about that. But also, if the bylaw enforcement person is a person of color, would your response be any different?
No,
I don't
not
know.
at all, because it's a racial comment. I don't care who you are. You could be equally racist or even more so. But I sometimes repeat loudly what that person said to me after I raised my voice, which I've actually done before. You just said that that's what you just said to me. That's what you get for bringing the virus here. Why did you say that? When he doesn't deny that's what he said, then you already have it filmed. Right? So you can actually
That's a very good strategy.
repeat what he said and say, I'm just sitting here, this is what happened, and you came over and said to me, blah, 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 and you said this, this, this. You actually described back, because someone probably filming, or your friend might be filming, that you do that deliberately, and by that time, he probably still think he is right, or she thinks she's right, so that she wouldn't necessarily contradict herself. That's what.
So what if the officer tried to get the footage from you?
This is a cop, or this is a bylaw officer?
Bylaw enforcement officer. You
can't.
can't. They don't have a right to do that.
Yeah, and record that too.
Yeah, because a lot of the time when they're saying, hey, you can't record that, you're not allowed to record, they're lying. You have every right to record a bylaw enforcement officer. If you're not, you're not doing anything wrong, they're in the public, there is a little expectation of privacy. Of course, it's a free.
So does that the same for police officer as well?
So
Do we have the right to?
I'm not a criminal lawyer, so we might need to fact check me, but you can't obstruct an officer. That is a criminal offense. So what that means is quite broad, I think. But if you are just filming them, they can't actually take away your phone unless they have like a search warrant or a court order. If they're detaining you, you might want to ask them why they are detaining you. Like, there's a whole lot of things that go in there, but typically, I mean, you can film a police officer.
Okay, great. That's very interesting, and I think we got a lot of very useful information out of this discussion. So, yeah.
I actually put in chat. I encourage people to put things in chat. I encourage you to actually turn on your camera, because I have no idea who Jay Wong is. Are you male, female? I don't know. Ollie, come on, let me see you. Since you can see me, I would love to see you, unless your background is a mess. That's okay. I'll show my background on YouTube. And so why not? Hey, it's 8:30. Holiday's coming. So I welcome you to put stuff in the chat so you can participate. And if you say something really interesting, we said, okay, let's turn on the mic and have a dialogue here. Okay. What I did on chat is, those of you that wants to find out that if your garbage doesn't get picked up, who do you call to complain on 311? For example, this is the City of Toronto latest directory online. So you could find out who is in charge of what area and who is the manager, etc. It's, it's there for you in the chat.
So that's great. So in the interest of time, we want to maybe get to our second scenario. So if we can post that, it's a little more detailed scenario. Alfred, would you like to take us through that?
So, okay, there we go. Case scenario number 2, it's about a person named Lynn. So Lynn was pregnant during the first wave of the pandemic, and her due date was around late September. Both she and her husband are temporary workers in Canada holding a work permit, so her OHIP coverage is dependent on the validity of her work permit, which was going to expire in July. Lynn submitted an application to IRCC, stands for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, to extend her work permit, but found out that she needed to have her biometrics via Service Canada in order to renew her work permit. So the biometrics is simply your photo and your fingerprint, which is required to renew and extend a work permit. However, when she contacted Service Canada location, she found that all their locations suspended the biometric services, so she could not renew her work permit or OHIP. And by that time, the ministry announced that all Ontarians can continue using their expired OHIP card during this pandemic season, and they don't have to renew their OHIP. However, when Lynn called Service Ontario, she was told that this only applied to Canadians or permanent residents. So for months, she got run around between IRCC and Service Ontario, but could not get anyone to either process her biometrics, a work permit, or OHIP. And after checking with the legal clinic and found that she should be eligible for an exemption, Lynn went to Service Ontario requesting an in-person consultation, but was told the same story by the receptionist and the service consultant there. And the staff made a comment that if she planned things better, she could have had more options, including going back home to have her baby.
So this is based on a real life scenario with some modification from one of our community member. So maybe before we go into the discussion, we can also get a poll done. So if you're in this situation as Lynn, and you're at that Service Ontario location right now, what would you do or consider? So you would consider go back home to China, or demand to speak to the program supervisor, or show her the policy as posted on the government website, or file a complaint, or get help from friends, from service providers, from lawyer, from media, from other places. So, and I think that you can choose more than one option, right?
I think so. I think you can for this poll.
And there's a second question as well. So about the last comment that the staff also made about her options, what would you do about that? Would you ignore that and just focusing on getting what you needed, or ask them to clarify what they mean and record it, or confront them about that being a racist comment, or file a complaint afterward, or demand to speak to the manager, or other strategies? And please put other ideas in the chat box if you can. Oh, yes, only able to select one option. We should have set it up a little bit differently, but I guess you choose your most preferred option then. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Back to the panelists. So what would you do? Maybe we start with Alfred, since you are the newcomer service person expert on the panel.
So I'll make a few remarks and then for sure opening up for input from my other colleagues and share their perspectives. So again, just a little bit of background of this scenario. It is true that your OHIP coverage for a temporary foreign worker with a work permit, those two things are tied together. And Lynn's difficulty was that she couldn't get her work permit. Also, she couldn't get her OHIP extended without a work permit. She couldn't get a work permit extended without the biometrics. Now, the Service Ontario staff, what they failed to recognize was that the IOCC had also granted an exemption. So if you are in Canada right now, if you have put in an application to extend a work permit, if all you're missing is your biometrics, because the locations are closed, the IOCC has also granted an exemption to someone who is in Lynn's situation. So in the work that we do, we come across these situations quite often. And what we found is that people coming through our doors, they don't just come with one need. They tend to come with a multitude of needs. So for instance, in Lynn's case, you can imagine, right? So she is facing, her own health challenges as a pregnant woman. There's a lot of stress from the uncertainty of having an expired work permit. There's a lot of confusion about her OHIP coverage and whether the extension applies in her situation. There's a frustration of being caught in between two different offices and two different levels of government. And what we have found is that, and unfortunately and sadly, people who are most vulnerable to this kinds of systemic racism are also the people that are least likely to do anything about it. Because for a few reasons. One, because they have so many things to deal with, and they just feel that I don't have time to deal with this right now. I got to get this straightened out. I have to get my work permit straightened out. And sometimes they don't do anything with it because of fear, right? They fear repercussion. If I upset this person, if I offend that person, they're going to make life even more difficult for me. And sadly, sometimes they don't do anything about it because they don't recognize it. Right? They don't recognize that those kinds of attitudes are not acceptable in Canada, and they just choose to ignore it. And so one thing that we're learning as a service providing agency is that the notion of providing service for our clients and the act of advocating for our clients, those two things are really hand in hand, right? So it is as much part of our job to advocate as well as to provide services. Now, just quickly looking at that comment by the Service Ontario staff, and I don't want to assume motive, but there are many ways that comment is problematic. So first of all, suggesting that if Lynn had planned better, she wouldn't be in this predicament. That's putting the blame or the responsibility on her shoulder, where in reality, the confusion was not a result of lack of planning by Lynn. It's the misinformation supplied by Service Ontario. Service Ontario's own commitment to client service states that clients have a right to expect accurate and reliable information from their staff. And so the staff in question in this scenario has failed to live up to that commitment. And also, part of that comment says for Lynn to go back home to have the baby. I mean, again, that is problematic on so many different levels, right? I mean, fundamentally, first of all, that's taking away Lynn's right to proper health care. And also, just that phrase, go back home, is loaded with such racist connotation. And even if I want to give people the benefit of the doubt and not assume the worst of motives, for someone who works in the public space, Lynn should have the right to expect the person would know better, at least from a professional standpoint. And so for Lynn to pursue this issue, I think at the very least, I mean, there is, she should pursue it and raise the issue, if nothing else, simply from the point of view of a lack of professional standards. Like, she has been given bad information from an office of the government that supposed to be supplying reliable information. As far as how she should go about doing it, my suggestion would be in line with what Kate has said earlier. She needs to pursue it in a way that won't do more harm to herself emotionally. So if that means getting someone to help, contacting a legal clinic, speaking with a service providing agency like a settlement agency, that would be the route that I would go. The good news is that in this environment, we're getting very much better at referring and cross referrals. So, when you connect with one service providing agency, it opens the door for you to connect yourself to different services that are available in the community as well. So I'll turn the floor over to my other colleagues and get their input at this point.
Well, this person, receptionist, obviously is not doing her job. She is giving people wrong information and needs to be disciplined because this may not be the only thing that she's doing. On top of being racist or, giving a comment saying whatever, making wrong assumptions. But she's actually giving incorrect information, i.e., she should not be allowed to continue to do so. And of course, I would escalate, document, write down the number of times, and ask to speak to the supervisor and the supervisor and the supervisor. And then afterwards, again, file the complaint, ask for appropriate action, copy it, in this case, to your local provincial member of parliament. And in each of their office. And remember, whether she is with status, without status, PR, citizen, she all pay HSTs and GSTs and all the taxes, property taxes. She has every right to get appropriate service, and she didn't get that. So again, want to follow it up, want to just keep pressing to say, what are you doing? How did you resolve this? And what happened to this worker? Okay. Now, because it's human resources, they may not know precisely what happened, but at least they need to acknowledge that this is wrong information and provide an apology at bare minimum.
Yeah, I would do exactly just that. I mean, I would also, document the comment that was made, file a complaint internally with this person's supervisor, and I'd just be persistent with it. I'd print out the policy, bring it to the front desk, and have them explain the discrepancy as to what they're saying. And if that, if that didn't work, I'd get the support of community organizations like Alfred's, or maybe even the legal clinic, like the Chinese Southeast Asian Legal Clinic, that provides services to low-income, non-English speakers from the Chinese and Southeast Asian communities.
So I think those are important and real helpful information. I guess the other things is like the person actually gone through, not only the frontline staff at the office was giving out wrong information, right? Because the person has to go through many hoops already through the IRCC and Service Ontario before she actually make the effort to go in person. So all the online services are not really working in that sense. And what would be the recourse of complaint about online services not being really, responsive or accurate or that? So that's a new kind of normal that we have been, contending with. And when that system is not responsible or not accountable, then what are some of the recourses we can take? Any thoughts?
It needs to be changed. I mean, as Service Ontario, or in this case, the federal government, all of that needs to be changed, right? And I would also, again, I see, aside from one, fixing the problem, fixing the program so the right information comes out. Number two, dealing with the people that are wrong or racist. Number three is then, again, see if it can be a learning moment. And the learning moment could be that I would go and get the story in the Chinese paper, for example, or English media or mainstream media, whoever's interested, so that people that are in the same situation will not will realize that, wait a second, there is an exemption, because this could be a blessing in disguise. People may not know that. Is it, oh, I can get exempt, I can get OHIP, right? And actually make it public if the person is willing, of course.
So Olivia, can I just ask you a question? In your experience, like tonight we're talking about issues of accountability and transparency and so on and so forth. What's been your experience like so for instance, between the municipal level of government and the provincial government? Those avenues, right? Like, do you find that they're equally as transparent and equally as responsive for things like this? Or is it the higher up you go, sort of the longer road you face to get something done?
Local is a lot easier, absolutely. More, what do you call it? Instant gratification. easier to get to the bottom of it. The federal government, the provincial, I don't know. I'm not as familiar because I wasn't an MPP. I was a federal member of parliament. Federal member of parliament, it's really difficult. The immigration department is full of people that give wrong information and just act outrageously. And what you do, you go to federal court and file a complaint. And it's almost no complaint. For the longest time, I said we need an ombudsperson on behalf of the immigrants. Still haven't gotten that. Whereas in Revenue Canada, you have an ombudsperson, right? So it's really hard to get justice in the federal level. But what you can do, what a member of parliament can do, can begin to say, documenting what is wrong. And if that member of parliament is responsible, can then escalate. And then I've gone to the Beijing office and talked to the consulate in the council in charge to say, these are the things what I've been experiencing. I've gone that far, right? So anyway, I digress. So federal, especially on immigration, it's full of problems.
I guess that's actually a very important and frequently encountered problem, right? Because the different levels of government kind of like turf around the responsibilities and accountabilities a lot. And for newcomers and immigrants, especially in the areas of healthcare, which is a provincial jurisdiction, but immigration is a federal jurisdiction. So people are really often caught in between. So I guess maybe, I don't know if we want to comment a little bit more about the fact that, so like there is a policy, but when it's not being practiced, so getting a piece of ID and permit process is one thing, but a lot of times we actually in the earlier workshop we talk about the challenges facing like people without OHIP in seeking healthcare, right? And we know that the province has a directive and a lot of extra funding for hospitals and places to serve anybody regardless of health status. But also as healthcare providers, I know that people are not getting treated, just and still being questioned and still being asked for those. And I think as Alfred said, usually people who are facing the most challenges may not be in the best position to confront the system at that moment because you need to have your needs met, first, right? So how do we strategize and deal with such situations when there's like these discrepancies amongst policies and practices, and when you're in a really dire situation, like sort of at the mercy of the service providers in a way, right?
Yeah, which is what your local elected representative is supposed to do. They are your servant. Their office are there to support you. And if you can't get very far, you're not getting very far, then I would not hesitate to phone up your local MPP or MP, whichever level government or city councilor, and really ask them what they can do to assist, and just keep bothering them until they do something. It's implementation is a huge problem. of the right policy. But I think in some cases, that's why legal clinics are really important, because they see enough of a pattern, and it becomes a one place where they could really do advocacy work collectively. So making sure that the NGOs or the legal clinics, someone know, but of course not ticket just as the individual cases, but a whole class of cases.
Like getting the support of local organizations like CCNCTO or even CCNCSJ to maybe that could form one of their advocacy platforms. Or what else could you? I mean, there's also the Ontario Ombudsman Office. If you're dealing with a provincial agency issue, then that could be a realm of recourse for you.
So we are actually nearing the end of our session, but I wanted to maybe pose the questions to Olivia. So you've been in public office for a long time. So we've been talking about, like as service recipients of the public services, but as public servants, what are some of the issues and challenges that you might have contended with in terms of racism and stuff in the system itself?
God, do you have another 2 hours? I could go.
You can give us a preview of things to come.
Okay, let me put on screen what I hear most. Go back to China. Okay, that's big. That's it happens quite often, especially all types of racist, sexist comments on my Twitter account, my Facebook, etc., Instagram. But face to face, when I go to public meetings or all candidates meeting, this is quite regular. And some people, I have a favorite friend that love to follow me around with a outrageously big sign that is all racist BS stuff. And, when the camera follows me as I was walking into a room, and he tries to show his sign and just become a pest. But anyway, and the day before the election, this is in the case when I was running for mayor, this is what shows up in the Toronto Sun. You ready for it, folks? Here it is. Well, see, the guy's not even a good cartoonist. But anyway, I wish I looked better than that. My glasses is that bad. But anyway, this is slanted eyes, okay? A Mao suit. This is stereotyping to the extent, right? So it's racist, obviously. But it's also really sexist because
you have to enlarge the button there.
Shows you on the coattails, right?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yep. Yeah, let me make this bigger. Okay, this is much bigger. Okay, yeah, so I'm on the coattail of Jack Layton. So this Chinese woman obviously know nothing, and all she is good at is riding a coattail of Jack Layton. Yes, that's fairly racist. If you were me, I don't know what you think you would do. This is the election. I woke up on election day with this with this wonderful.
Was there a backlash to that, Olivia?
The sad thing is no. Toronto started a little article. CP24 did an interview. The guy who did the interview is racialized himself, and he was really incensed. But there was not any comment. Like the candidates that ran, John Tory, Doug Ford, said very little, and the media didn't make a big deal out of it.
Did you address it publicly?
Pardon?
Did you ever address it publicly?
Oh, yes, of course. Are you kidding?
I think she wanted to hear our other strategies before she disclosed her role. Right?
I want to hear what she did.
No, oh, of course I did. The CP24 put a mic in front of me and I would say blah, 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 racist, sexist, and racist, blah, blah, etc. You can predict what I'm going to say, what I said. But no, there was no outrage. Yeah, because I think this was by around 10 or 11 o'clock the night before this started coming out. And this was right on election day.
That's
So I see in
terrible.
the chat box that Candace wrote that CCNCTO actually did make a statement
Ah, thank you.
at that time.
Richard said, racists are so unoriginal. Attitude is so overused, eh? Can they do better than a slanted eye thing?
So maybe, if anyone has other ideas, please send into the chat box. But so I guess like if we're in public office, you are subjected to all these things, right? So what are some of the strategies, obviously community allies and people who believe in social justice should all be speaking up. But it's also like a very politicized moment, right? Because it's like strategically come out on the day just before the election. So that's so many things at play at that point. So I would really wanted to hear how you responded to it.
I said what I just said a few minutes ago, but there really wasn't much you can do because Toronto Sun claims that they have the right to do so. Now, in the past, I have taken the Toronto Sun to press council. This is before they stopped claiming that they want to be part of the press council. And I've had reporter twice being declared to be unprofessional or had to apologize. I have threatened libel suit because of outrageous behavior. And I won each time. But the problem of that is they still have the platform. You don't. So it is difficult. So you have to cultivate friends, people that support, that are in the media that are less, more objective, less biased against you. And you sometimes have to, depends on the occasion, really make a big case out of it if there's time and opportunity to do so. Sometimes, in some instances, if they are fairly minor, then you have to just get on to doing what you need to do. So, and just ignore any number of things. Toronto Sun really went after me, said that I was pandering gay votes. This is in 1985 when I ran the whole campaign to have anti-homophobic curriculum in schools. But if you're very clear on what you want to do, you will get flagged. And one way to see it, if it's from media, is that, hey, you must be doing something right if people really, if they're going after you. If no one cares about what you're doing and are not going after you, maybe you're not doing enough. So you can interpret it that way too.
But I think, isn't that illustrative of the whole problem we're talking about this evening, right? The key in that situation shouldn't have been what Olivia do to respond, right? I think for me, the key is in the fact that there was not an outcry, like there was not a backlash or something to that magnitude of racism and sexism and who knows whatever elseism that is involved in that, right? And I think it goes back to the whole thing. It shouldn't be up to the victim to be the sole voice of speaking out against racism, right? And I think that's indicative of a wider scenario that we're living in.
Yeah, I think we should get Kenneth opening his mic. it is true.
Mhm.
What you said in chat.
Candace, you want to make a
I
comment?
think I just wanted to add on in that thank you, Olivia, for speaking. And I really appreciate hearing your perspective at the time. I was much younger at the time. And so for me, it was very much seeing it just on the news. And I agree that I don't remember much outcry or outrage from it. Meanwhile, I think many of Chinese Canadians in my circle were asking questions why there wasn't much outcry. And so I think your ability to speak out and kind of that um, fearlessness to speak out is very inspiring and taking up space, because oftentimes I think even East Asians, we are taught to not speak out and be loud. And so taking up space to me has always been a lifelong lesson and lifelong self-growth kind of thing that I continue to practice. But I think what I just wanted to add is that sometimes even for allies, if they're holding on certain jobs, such as like reporting, even doing that can be very dangerous at wrong times. They might lose their jobs and such. And I'm speaking because when we were really promoting the COVID racism reporting tool during May, and that was the week where George Floyd died, it was very nuanced with how reporters were willing what to report. And so that was a good lesson and learning for me too. And so that's why I felt like making that comment about taking space needs to be strategic and nuanced, especially for racialized, and we're speaking about racism in already a very white supremacist society.
Thank you, Candace.
Thank you, Kenneth.
And Kate, you want to?
Oh, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And thank you so much, Olivia, for taking up space and being such an inspiration for so many East Asians out there. I know I've been incredibly inspired by you and your work.
Oh, thank you.
So yes, I wanted to echo that, and I also wanted to, I guess maybe I can invite our panel to end with some comment, because it takes incredible courage and persistence, like what Olivia did, in being in public service, and we really have been encouraging East Asian and other racialized community to take up that space and to run for office, and but a lot of times there is a lot of price to pay as well, right? So how do we as a community, as Alfred said, take up our collective accountability and not just let the individuals have to bear the burden of just fighting all sorts of oppressions on their own, right? So how do we create a structural system and society that actually can enable collective empowerment? So I think that is a really important lesson. So I think throughout the different cases we talk about, when we want people to speak up, when we want people to challenge the system, is not just about your own justice, really is about collective justice, right? And advancing social justice for all. So maybe we can leave with some words of inspiration and encouragement from our three panelists about how we can move forward. And I think this is also our last workshop for the year. So, as we have navigated through this really challenging year, maybe some words of encouragement and um, to share with our audience as we close this session. And again, like before I forgot, I wanted to thank all of you for your incredibly insightful and inspiring comments and perspective. And we look forward to having you back for some more exciting discussion. So, I actually do want to end with your words. So let's do some of our advertisement first. So actually, we do have 2 more community partnerships showcase to launch in the coming weeks. And before we end, we actually do have 2 more poll questions, which is like whether as a result of this session, you've increased your awareness, and also about racism, and also about strategies to deal with them. Thank you. So I just wanted to publicize 2 more of our community partner showcase, which will be launched next Tuesday and the following Tuesday. So next Tuesday, we're very excited to have the leader from the Asian Canadian Comedian Network, Vaughn Sundara, who is also actually one of the collaborator of Protech, to share his experience. And then on the 29th, we have the organizer and leader from Butterfly, the Network for Migrant Sex Workers, talk about the incredible work they've been doing to support our communities throughout this pandemic. So please tune in to our Community Partner Showcase Tuesday at 6, but also ongoingly on YouTube once they're up. You can access our full library. So again, I want to thank our panel speakers, and I wanted to pass the mic back to you to share some passing thoughts and comments for our community. Maybe we start with Olivia and.
Oh, backwards. I thought Kate first. Okay. All right.
You are the last word.
Okay. All right. The other way. All right. The last shall be first. I taught that way. Anyway, there is an election going on right now. Scarborough Agincourt, right in the city of Toronto, has the highest percentage of Chinese Canadian Southeast Asians living in the city. Scarborough Agincourt, yup. And there is a whole group of Chinese Canadian running for office. I happen to like one. I won't be totally biased. I would be totally biased, but I'll let you sort out who is the best one. And that riding, having that high number of Chinese Canadian living there, surely should have someone that can reflect, represent them at City Hall. That reflect the population of the area. So I urge you to take a few minutes to check out Scarborough Agincourt. The election is the first or second week of January. Never miss an opportunity to make a difference, because during by-elections, very few people show up. And the fact that you can actually, I know it's a full-fledged pitch, if you can actually take some time and get some people engaged and get them inspired and get them to come out to vote, it would make a huge difference, right? In the last 5 years after I stopped being stopped being elected, I started an institute called Institute for Change Leaders. Really, the whole objective is objecting racism. But anyway, the objective is actually getting people politically and community do political organizing so that they can find hope, get the leadership skills, gain power to get the change they want. So join me, and I'll put the URL in the chat.
Thank you, Olivia. Alfred?
Well, I've learned a lot this evening, just, listening to the sharing and the exchanges. And I think one thing that I come away with, and I often encourage people to think that way, is that we're all advocates, right? And sometimes the most powerful act of advocacy, it happens when you break out of your own social bubble, using sort of or cultural bubble, and advocate for a group that is not immediately associated. You're not immediately associated with, right? So, when I was working in a church, right, the most powerful form of advocacy sometimes happens when churches speak out against issue of Islamophobia, right, or any kind of discrimination, right, xenophobia, discrimination against the LGBTQ community. So advocacy isn't just limited to discrimination that we personally experience. We are all called to be advocates, and when we learn to do that, we make a difference in our workplaces, we make a difference in our schools, we make a difference in our communities.
Thank you. Last but not least, Kate, give me the last word.
That's great, and thank you so much. I've had a lot of fun today on tonight's discussion. I think I just want to end on a little bit of a plug. I think Kenneth touched on it a little bit earlier, but CCNC, Chow, and a host of our other partner organizations across the country have come together to form COVID Racism, which is an online reporting tool. So I really do encourage everyone that has witnessed racism or discrimination throughout the pandemic or experienced it themselves firsthand to report on that website because numbers mean so much for our advocacy efforts, and we'll be advocating on both a local, thank you very much for pulling that up, on both local and national platforms. And we also just launched a podcast. It's on that website as well. You can click podcast in that top bar, which is hosted and created by Calvin Toe, who is on our computer screens right now. And Kelvin actually interviewed people that inputted entries into that website. So if you want to get an idea of some of the stories that we've been hearing, I encourage you all to check it out. It's also on Spotify.
So we actually have a previous session where Calvin and Kenneth share some of the podcast. So please tune in to our channel as well. So again, wants to thank everyone for staying over time and spending a very fruitful and helpful evening with us. Very exciting, insightful conversation. So wishing you all a wonderful upcoming holiday season and new year for much brighter and hopeful 2021. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.